Okay, we're ready.
All right, good evening. Welcome to the October 16th, 2024 Poolesville Planning Commission meeting. On the agenda tonight, we have citizens' comment on agenda items. Anybody waiting to speak?
No, and we have no one signed up.
No one signed up. Any announcements from staff?
I don't think we have any at this time. Wade, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I don't. Not at this time, no.
Yeah.
I will add, Martin Radigan is not here this evening. This would have been his final meeting, and I asked him in advance if he had any announcements. He did not. But on his behalf, or on the board's behalf, I would like to thank him for the 8 years of service he served as a town commissioner. Did a lot of hard work for the commissioners and for the planning commission. I know he and I started around about the same time. I know I've learned a lot being able to work with him and serve with him, and I just want to thank him for that and wish him well in his post-public service life.
Very good.
All right, approval of minutes.
All right.
You have to help me out with this. I know we got,
Yes.
If we have two, we can go ahead and approve, right?
Exactly. So we had a conversation about past precedent, and Wade reminded me that Jay had given an opinion in the past. As long as there are two members who were at the meetings, they can be approved.
Okay.
So for the July minutes, that would be Chuck and Kevin. And so if you guys want to review those and then take a vote on those, and then for the next two, it would be Brian and Kevin. So that's the way that we can do them, as long as there are no amendments, changes, or anything else like that.
Good. I'll make a motion to approve the July 10th, 2024 minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstained.
That's right, you were in for that one.
Yep,
Come out for the next ones.
yep. So,
I can move it, though.
yeah. So then for the August meetings, as we said, it was Kevin and Brian were there, so.
All right.
Kevin, I cannot make any motions.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the August 14th, 2024 minutes.
Second.
You can't second because you weren't here.
I can second.
You can second, you can't.
You told me I had to
But
second.
yeah,
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
One abstention.
one, okay.
And Sam, I can make a motion to approve the September 11, 2024 meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
One abstention.
Okay. Then,
Thank you.
yeah,
All right, on to new business. Discussion of the Hearts PIA.
all right. So if you would like to come up, but I'll just say a couple of brief things. The staff and the applicant have negotiated the terms of the PIA for the Hart's property on Fisher Avenue. These are standard terms based on previous PIA agreements. This agreements includes provisions for underground utilities and fees for things like the connection fees and the parkland fee. And then in your packet was the full PIA. Kevin helped me out here, and he noted one.
Yeah, section 12.
Section 12, I had copied and pasted it from a previous one.
Yeah.
And that, did it print weirdly? It might have. There we go. It says 2022 at the end, that should be 2025, and that has been fixed in my master copy, and so will be available for the signature. Once it, just as a note, this gets, the commissioners approve it, but the planning commission approves it, but the commissioners, the town commissioners have to ratify that at their meeting.
Let me introduce John Reagan to you gentlemen. John's the developer
President
and
of the
owner of the
Crystal
property. And
Here, if you want to just sit there and then bring the microphone down, just so that the YouTube audience can hear.
Donovan, you in or not?
My name is Gary Hartz. I was a former owner of the property that's being developed, but the PIA will be signed by Mr. John Reagan, and Donovan Coram is the engineer that's working on the project now. And if you have any follow-up questions or anything at all, I'll defer to John.
Well, thanks. Any questions?
Only a tangential one. Any estimation on when you'll hope to start construction?
Yesterday.
I thought about a year back.
It's been a while.
Whenever Montgomery County approves the stormwater management, then.
Oh, you're still waiting on stormwater?
We have
That's,
the
we did.
stormwater management and also state highway.
Okay.
Just we had to do a-
Stormwater's always.
Yeah,
Last
the-
order for this.
Chuck, we had to come back in for another extension, as you probably were aware on the preliminary plan, because, as you folks know, we've been meeting off and on for a number of years on this project.
Quite a few.
And Donovan just let us know as he walked in here this evening, that he's been contacted by Montgomery County Stormwater Management, and they're in the process of wrapping up the technical report. So we're expecting approval by the end of the week, Donovan?
Yeah, we should, for the record, Donovan Coram, CGM Consulting. We should have the technical approval. I'm in contact with Andrew, and then he should have us in writing with that technical approval. And then we're shipping that off to SHA, and that's the last item that they're needing for them to do their final review and then hopefully their blessing.
The State Highway Administration is the longest piece of paper that I've had in place. And I think it was 17 when I submitted my first piece
You were
of paper.
17?
to the state.
Feels that way.
you'll be able to drink it a couple more years.
Okay.
You fellows have not been the delay. Thank you.
I don't have anything
I have none there.
concerned.
I've read it through and I'm all good with, yep.
All right.
Staff does recommend it being approved. And as we talked about before, this language is just a narrative that legally binds and captures everything that was in the site plan that's been approved.
I move that we approve the Hartz Estate LLC PIA.
My second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Which cares? Thank you, Mr. Hartz.
Good luck, and it's been a long process.
They threw you out.
Thanks. Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
I thought you'd take it all your.
I know, right?
You know, he's running for commissioner. You never know what they might do.
All right. Now to some old business. Not quite as old as Mr. Hart's, but the applicant requested amendment for the PIA for the Willard project. My understanding from staff, and as we read the staff's memo, this is the formal request of what they came to visit us with last time.
In your packet, starting on page 11, is the letter from Mr. Clifford.
And it seemed to encapsulate everything we talked about last time. I didn't see anything that caught me off guard, or I don't think it really missed anything that we discussed, so.
So, yeah, just for clarification for the audience, the applicants are requesting that the maximum square footage of houses be raised from 2,000 square feet to 2,200, as noted in the letter in the first paragraph. It says, to reset the maximum square feet for each home from the 2,000 square foot limit as set forth in section 6.b of the PIA and section 2 of the allocation to a new limit of 2,200 square feet. And then the applicant gives provisions for why this is. The applicant is also requested, or worked with the county on their impact fees related to the same 2,200 square foot limit. And then there's further information from Wade and then the applicant. So unless I missed anything, I think that concludes the staff report for this.
Wade, you going or am I going?
You can go ahead.
Okay, all right. James Clifford, on behalf of the Willards, the Fish Pool LLC on the Willard property next to Town Hall here, right out that door. I used to tell my kids when they were growing up I was never more wrong than when I was certain I was right. And I was certain that we were going to be able to build this community out with first floor master bedrooms on the first floor and keep the houses at 2,000 square feet. And I think when I was last here, I promised you I wouldn't be back here with this nonsense. But I've been taken to school by the architects and by the builders, and we're finally starting to see the real design starting to come in. Then I had a couple conversations with folks at Park and Planning. They're trying to put together they put together a piece of legislation on impact taxes, and they've been trying to figure out what that magic number is for square footage. And they used an arbitrary number of 1,800 square feet initially because HOC had told them that was their number to build affordable houses. It didn't have anything to do with master bedrooms or anything else. This is not an affordable housing community. This is a missing middle community that we're trying to build here. And it's to be sensitive to what we were told by the citizens of Poolesville, that they'd like to see a community where first-time home buyers could come in and old people like me could move down into homes here. And so we could kind of keep ourselves where we like to be here in Poolesville. So we thought with 4,000, 5,000 square foot lots, very small, highly constrained lots, that we could keep the houses pretty small. And we thought 2,000 square feet was a good target. I've really learned that it's very difficult to get first floor masters on a house that has a front entrance or front garage, front loading garage. The garage intrudes inside of the footprint, cuts it down by about 400 square feet, plus the master bedroom takes another 400 square feet, and there's just not enough house left. Most townhouses are 2,200 square feet. So we'd say this is probably comparable to townhouses as far as square footage goes. It's the lot constraints that really make it difficult. These are small lots. So we're back. We think about half the houses are likely to take advantage of a 2,200 square foot building pad if possible. The market will decide it. If more people show up wanting 1,800 square feet than 2,200 square feet, then there won't be as many built. Even if everybody wants a 2,200 square foot house, the building lot configurations, the dimensions of it won't allow it, won't prevent it. Somebody asked, do we have guardrails on this thing? And those are the guardrails. It's the lot size and configuration. So if you look at my letter, you'll see that all the front-loaded lots, there'd be about 27 of those based on the lots decide what could be built on them. And they think that there'd be 21 lots that could take advantage of a 2,200 square foot footprint. And then of the 35 rear-loaded lots, they think probably about 12 of them could go there. I was cautioned to say that it's not inconceivable that a rear-loaded garage might also intrude into the footprint. I was kind of thinking rear load meant that it was a detached only. And so I think I kind of hedged this language by saying most of. We think most of them will be not intruding into the footprint, but some of them will, a few of them apparently. So if you think of it along the lines of about 33 houses that have the potential to go to 2,200 square feet. I'm not saying that's how many will go. That's what we're looking at today. And so what we're asking is, in the PIA and in the water allocation agreements, both of them, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Wade, but I think the water allocation agreement kind of takes their lead off of the Public Works agreement. The Public Works agreement said 2,000 square feet. So we need that to be modified and then carry over into the water and sewer allocation. That's all I got to say about that. Most of the houses being built in Upper Montgomery County are bigger square footage than our lots are.
Any questions?
I'm not as familiar with I wasn't here for the, the full process of developing the PIA and everything, but did you say that when you talk about them going over the footprints, could you explain that to me?
Yeah, what they have to do is when they get to take the subdivision plats and break them down on lot level, they have to factor in the building restriction lines, they have to factor in easements, they have to factor in stormwater pond, receptacles. There's a lot of constraints that go into that 4,000 or 5,000 square foot lot. So what they end up doing is using all that information, setbacks, all that, they create a building footprint. They're saying, okay, this is the area that's free of everything else that you can build a house on. Some of our lots are narrower, some are wider, some are 5,000 square feet, some are 4,000 square feet. So taking all of those lots one at a time and having their land planner figure out what footprints could go, what houses could go on which footprints, this is the breakdown. So what I gave you is based on that. It's not variable. It's pretty much the way it is.
I think the overlap you spoke of was the rear load garages typically would not overlap with the footprint of the house.
Right.
But in a few cases, it may.
Right, because again, it might be necessary to integrate part of the garage or all the garage into the footprint of the first floor of the house. All the front load garages have an integrated garage into the house itself. And it just, these houses, picture these houses as about 1,000 square feet on the first floor. You realize you're taking out 400 for a master bedroom, 400 for a garage, you're down to 200 square feet where you're trying to put the rest of the house. So that's where they've said that if they could add another 200 square feet to the first floor of the house, they could work in a master bedroom and not totally impair the rest of the house. They actually asked us to do 2350, but I did a little homework, and I think that was probably the best case scenario for them, but not necessary. I think they can accomplish what they have to accomplish at 2,200. So I put it in at 2,200. When I went in front of the county council in Montgomery County, we're trying to reset the impact taxes in Montgomery County. They're very inequitable and create a great disparity between affordable housing and McMansions because a 2,000 square foot house pays a $60,000 impact tax just like a 4,500 square foot house does. And in the green zone, which is the Ag Reserve in Poolesville, it's worse. It's worse. It's in the green zone that it gets up to be almost $60,000. So we asked them if they would recalculate it, and I had Nancy Florian with me, who was the president of the council when this impact tax was put in effect, and she was sitting next to me telling her predecessors, we made a mistake. We've created this inequity. This should not have continued for this long. It should have been looked at long ago. Let's go back, let's correct it. This is the most important thing you could do as a council, is to fix this. So they, in their conservancy, I hate to refer to them as being conservative. Let's say in their reluctance to give up tax money, they said they would study it. I talked to Sidney Katz of the council, and he said that he thinks that if they will deduct the garage and the basement from their calculations, they don't do a square foot calculation now. It's one size fits all. So that impact tax, they don't even bother to do a calculation. If we can get them to do a calculation and exclude the garage and use the 2,200 square foot model and put the impact tax at about half, that's what the Park and Planning suggested, about half for those houses, that makes it viable and gives us a chance to build missing middle houses, which we desperately need in Poolesville, but the whole county needs them.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, I promise I won't be back after this.
Sure, you're right.
Good. I'll make a motion to, any other questions?
No, I'm fine, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion to approve the PIA as amended for the Willard project.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
How does that bleed over into the allocation agreement?
So that will, then we can include that with it, right? Updating the allocation agreement, and that goes to the commissioners.
That's correct. That's correct. I'll probably put it on Monday's agenda for the commissioners to consider.
Okay. Do they consider the PIA as, or the Public Works Agreement as
Yeah.
well?
Yes, the two will be,
Both of them will go to the,
yeah.
okay.
Clarify.
And you need me there for that?
No, we can carry the ball on that.
Okay.
I guess since we don't have our liaison going from this meeting to the meeting on Monday.
We can convey that the information of this discussion to.
Yeah, and it's just that I think in this, we didn't really have we didn't give much of an explanation. And I think
Okay, fair.
the commissioners should probably hear something a little bit more.
I mean, I can come if you think it helps.
For me, there's been a lot of give and take throughout this entire process. I don't think this is a huge give up on the town side. I think we're gaining a lot by moving forward with this. And I don't think it's even going to be noticeable, to be honest.
Right, and the whole point of getting the ability to have the option of first floor masters that's been a discussion since literally
Day
day
one.
one, or actually probably day negative a couple.
Yeah.
So losing that would be just, terrible from what we were originally conceiving. Speaking as somebody who's actively looking at floor plans nowadays at my age, for
Yes.
the next step, that we'll have a first floor master. I understand even more so than when we started this process.
We'll have the sales staff be in touch with you tomorrow.
Okay? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
That's, yeah.
Yeah. And our last agenda item, well, second to last, for our last old business is following up discussion on the Cultural Arts District.
All right, so I'll just sort of read my little intro, and then we can get into this sort of specifically. At the September Planning Commission meeting, the commissioners requested that staff summarize our progress in the Cultural Arts District and provide specific questions for commissioners to review. We'll find this information in a separate memo, which we'll talk about in a second. This discussion includes questions related to the use chart, definitions, specific questions regarding form-based zoning based on John's presentation from last time, and and then the design guideline discussion from last meeting as well, where the indication there, that's sort of the easiest one to go through, was to sort of do design guidelines based on the Georgetown design guidelines that I'd shared previously. So on that front, what I went through is I looked at that, and then I looked at our sign code, and then I drew up 8 sort of specific questions about that. So I don't know what order you want to take it in. Kevin had provided his own feedback to me, which is in the draft that I printed out for you guys, and Wade, it's in the Google draft, if you have that up. And
I do, and thank you, Kevin, for jumping
Yeah.
in and asking questions like that. I love seeing that.
Yep, no, that was great. And so anything that you, where do you want to start? Do you want me to start to go through it from the first page and go forward? It's up to really you guys, but what I tried to do is be as specific as possible so that we can come back with more specific things in the coming meetings.
That's go in order for me.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's easier that way.
Okay, so for the first thing, I just sort of went over the boundaries again of the Cultural Arts District. Again, basing it sort of on that intersection of Elgin and Fisher, with an extension up for that sort of first row of historic houses and kind of that area where the gas station and the hardware store is and that kind of thing. And then going down West Willard and then to Wooton on that end. So it's sort of that block ending at Norris over here. So as I said, sort of the sides of Norris and West Willard. So just in case there's any questions on those boundaries, I know we'd shrunken it over time, so I just wanted to confirm that and make sure there's any questions.
Just want to clarify, both sides of West Willard.
Yes, sorry, both.
I just wanna make sure.
I thought I said the west side of West Willard so that it,
Just wanted to clarify, cool.
yeah, so it starts on that side and then goes over. And then I had looked up some sort of, to look at sort of the Cultural Arts District in terms of your goals that we'd set out sort of a few months ago. So we talked about preserving the historic character, creating walkability, and then utilizing form-based zoning to sort of create flexibility in those areas. So that was just the high-level, big-picture stuff, and I just wanted to make sure we hadn't missed anything there from our previous discussions. Is there any questions on any of that? Okay. Then we went through and looked at uses and definitions in the Cultural Arts District, and I went back and looked at some of our specific things. We can get it, depending on how you guys want to go with it. You can look at the spreadsheet again on use chart. There were certain things where, which I can pull up on the screen, but there were certain things where we had a general idea of how we wanted to do things, and so I tried to plot it that way, and we can look at that if we need to. But there are some broad questions that I thought were good to cover. The first is residential uses. So as the chart references, meaning the use chart, not allowing single-family home, more the idea of either mixed development or multi-use housing in this area. And the question that I sort of ask is, do we want to limit single residential to a special exception use or not allow it at all? And this was something that you had mentioned, Chuck, at one point. And so I'd written into the chart, and I just wanted to bring that back into the discussion. I don't know if, Kevin, you wanted to share your comment there or if you want me to, but.
Yeah, just obviously, we're going to talk about parking at some point, and I just can imagine having entrances along your historic, or cultural arts district is going to limit the type of parking you can, easily put in there. So that's why I was, the apartment usage, we'll have to think about that as well, but just the single-family homes, the way that they're set up with driveways, I think would be problematic in townhomes also. And then parking is just part of it, but that's,
Yeah.
Certainly.
I mean, okay.
I was going to say, I agree with that thought, but I have trouble in my mind just ruling it out altogether. There could be pockets or spots where that's really the only thing that makes sense. Maybe to have a house there, because sometimes pipe stems or something like that might make better use of the land, so.
For example, like Norris and Wooton, as that's probably the one that jumps out at me is, if you're going to do single family, that would fit there. Whereas almost anywhere left on West Willard, I have trouble seeing it, especially with the
Yeah.
parking and the road, more road cuts out there. So, yeah. But, yeah, I'm with you.
As long as we feel confident enough that a special exception will keep out development,
Yeah.
a multi single family use or single family homes.
And that's,
I'm just trying to think of all the lot configurations in
Yeah.
there. I don't think they're, unless they were to be combining.
Oh, you're right, taking down something existing and redoing, yeah, that'd be the only,
And de-subdividing, if you will.
yeah, yeah. Which is, in some ways, kind of goes against one of our goals for that entire area.
Right.
Kind of, it's funny, kind of going back to what we were talking about with the lower property is having something more, even one level further down in terms of affordability, which gets into mixed, well, we need to figure out what we're going to call that
Right.
in the new zoning
Yeah.
chart, I think, whatever that entity to be named later is. Will be much more affordable, call it apartment or whatever, which we're missing today.
I
See,
don't know.
sorry.
Yeah, just going back to your question about special exception, I don't know if we could put more specific provisions on the special exception for the cultural arts district, if that was an option. That's something that I wasn't sure. Like if we could say, this is what you have to consider in applying for a special exception or not.
I don't know, but even if we couldn't, when we do get around to finalizing the wording on the kind of the purpose, or maybe not the purpose, the vision of that whole area, we should probably think about putting a little bit in there to explain what we're envisioning specifically on future residential in that whole area. And hopefully the future planning commission will look at that and consider that carefully when addressing any SEs that get requested. I mean, I seriously, I doubt there will be any, but you never know. So that's why I brought it up initially to either eliminate it or at a minimum put it as a special exception. And I like it doing it as just a special exception. I don't like completely walling it off.
Yeah, we can put the guardrails up with other
Yeah.
information we put in.
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
All right, good. We can do that as.
So while we're there, stick there for a second. So
Yeah.
note on the whole parking topic. Or do you have parking as a topic later?
So the idea there was, because I know you had information you wanted to share, that would be next month's.
I
meeting.
lost. Yeah.
Okay.
I ended up, I searched, I don't know. I wrote it up. I remember writing it up. I swore I sent it to Wade and John last winter, and I could find no evidence of it, except that I remember spending a couple of days working on it, and it's all gone. I still have some of the references bookmarked, but I can't find it. So yeah, I gotta redo all my homework.
Let me dig.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I couldn't find it in my sent mail. I know I sent it to, and if Wade couldn't find it in his received mail, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Poof. Yeah, so I gotta redo all my work.
Like a little,
Okay. So, but I guess if you want to bring something up related to parking right now, that's fine, but I was just,
The only thing I would is kind of that, I do see, in general, I see parking for residential as potentially different and having different rules, very different rules than parking for non-residential. So I want to make sure that I don't blanket cover all of them, because I think they're very different. Just kind of leave that there for the future.
parking, okay. And if you want to meet between now and the next meeting, we can talk more about what you wanted to do, and we can write something up that way, maybe.
Yeah, I'm gonna I'll definitely have to rewrite up what I had, and I want to run it by you three prior to that, so that's my takeaway homework.
Yeah. Okay, then the second part of that residential use is, Lexi had brought up specifically the idea of trying to limit the housing, potentially the residential housing, to only second floor apartments, or at least emphasizing that in the design of mixed-use spaces or something like that. So there's a couple of different approaches you could do. You could make that sort of a preference in the design guidelines, or do it that kind of way. Another idea was trying to make it sort of the definition. And we'd have to look at this in more detail, but in a later section, you'll see where I talk about the various definitions. I added one for mixed use, and then I added, with the language, the use would contain first floor retail, commercial, or art space with residential space above. So I thought that could be another approach. That's that's a little bit further down. But I was just trying to get people's more thoughts on that part, since Lexi had brought that up in a previous meeting.
Yeah, I don't want to limit it to just mixed use. Mixed use is great, but I could easily envision, and frankly would like to see, a multi-story apartment over in that area that's completely apartment. And very well might have to have parking as the first floor with the apartments built over top, possibly. But yeah. So I do not want to rule that out. I can think of at least two or three great potential spots for that over there. For it to be a little bit higher density, which makes it much more potential that it could actually happen
Yeah.
from a developer's standpoint. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, getting that into the design guidelines is, a good start. So, folks know that that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, it could be a preference or something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
Something where we say these are the types of multi-use or apartment housing and sort of list them or something like that.
And again, that kind of goes back to kind of the vision or concept for the entire area as well.
I mean, that's what made sense to me. Did you have a thought, Wade? Sorry, I just want to make sure.
No, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So then, one question came, I think you had brought up in reference to this only residential or residential with second floor. The other question was raised about bed and breakfasts, and I just want to clarify, that's a separate use under the use chart, and so that could be handled separately. That was just a note, just based on the discussion that I reviewed.
Yeah.
And
I don't envision anybody building a brand new building to be a B&B, but
Yeah.
there's some great homes, existing ones over there, especially after my experience for the last 6 months, it would make perfect B&Bs, which I did several of in New England, so yeah, I get it. Yeah, I get it.
One of the requirements is a warm shower.
And an indoor toilet, yeah.
Okay, and then the next section was about the use chart, and I don't know how much detail you want to go in there right now, but basically what I did is I went back and I looked at the use chart from the perspective of everything we talked about. So there's a couple of things. One we talked about is limiting the type of usage where it takes up a lot of space. So open space and things like that. And so when I went back and went through the use chart, I basically did, I'm just going to try to pull it up here for a second. There we go. What I did is I made sort of everything, so I put certain things as special exception. We can change that if we want apartment house to be permitted. Here, let me share this so that Wade can look at it too. Hang on one second.
I got it up on my computer.
Okay, perfect. And so I then did, and so I looked at where I had a few things was this discussion about dwellings, townhomes, and single-family homes. I said SE or no based on our previous discussions. And then, things like guest rooms, accessory uses for compensation. So that's the related, that's not quite a B&B, but that would be a related use. So I put that as permitted or special exception depending on where the discussion went. So there are things like that that I noted that we did not talk about last time, that as I reviewed the use chart, I found that fit into these broader conversations. So I tried not to make those, and then for anything else, I made it the same. For anything that I didn't think fit into this category, I made the use the same as either the old CBD or the PCOM, applying these general parameters that we talked about.
Good.
So basically, so this is a good example. So the antenna and stuff for cellular technology, granted it's really only on the water tower, but that was just a discussion where people were like, maybe. So I was thinking for those it'd probably be no, but I just wanted to note that just in case there was some further discussion. And then other ones, the telephone ones are similar, but what it was really things like auction houses had been permitted, is permitted in the general zone, but in the old CBD was a special exception, so I put that yes, no. I'm not sure where that fit. I think I meant to put that SE or P, but any case. But generally just following it that. So automobile, campers, RV, sales, outdoor, that was one that specifically we had said SE before, or to make it, it had to be small scale. That was the discussion there.
Indoors.
Indoors.
The key word there is indoors.
Then the outdoor ones, I just left blank because under the way the use chart works, blank means not allowed. So where there was a firm no, I just left them blank because that's the reference. So that's where we get into building materials, suppliers, wholesalers. That was something that had not been allowed in the old CBD. And because wholesalers could have outdoor space with it, that's where there was, I put it as a no, so things like that.
Concur.
So I tried, again, where you want to go. Department stores was another one where it was SE previously in the old CBD, that is an indoor use, but that'd be a large indoor use. So that was a good example of where do we want really something like that to take up a lot of space. So, and so going forward and so on. So specific things, this is where Lexi had said no to farm equipment storage and sales, farm implements, excuse me, not in the CAD. Obviously, we have Tractor Supply and things like that, and that is allowed in the PCOM generally, so there's some stuff related to that. And that had to go through a special exception process. And then we had a discussion about florist shops, so we said yes to that, but not nurseries.
Correct.
That was a distinction, and that's something that we wanted to flesh out, is something like that.
Is that a separate line item in the use chart?
That's where we're gonna have to, that was one, garden supply shops, I put as a special exception, just because that's what Lexi said, size.
Yeah.
So we could say no, or a special exception, just because of that size factor.
Sure.
Yep.
But I put that as a special exception because that's what we talked about last time. That's why it wasn't where it was specific, I tried to do our specific thing. And then, pet shop, I tried to match what we'd done previously. Again, that one might be more of a yes or no. Then landscaping contractor, that was a size one again, so special exception. And that was something that was confirmed at the July meeting.
I remember the discussion.
And then these, I tried to match as much as possible. The RV camper storage, that was a no, so we just did that. I think that was pretty. Care homes was one that we had a discussion about, but in that discussion, we left it as is, which would be a special exception. Because that is like the use chart definition talks about senior, both a nursing home, but also like a rehab space, something like that. So that's where that discussion was. Assisted living, all of those type of things. And then, again, a lot of these matched here. The idea of a hospital was a no, and that was what we had discussed, so we did that. And then these were, again, there was a discussion about sign fabrication and metalworking. You'd asked that, and that became a definitional discussion, which we'll have in a moment.
Okay.
But for the purposes of metalworking and things like that, I put it as permitted based on that separate discussion. And then billiard parlors, we had a very brief discussion about, and there was just a discussion about, is that something we wanted or not? And then that led to John's joke about the Music Man. But we didn't get an answer on it, so I put it as SE or no. So we can look into that. And then this whole category, so this is where it's amusements and stuff. And this is where we had a lot of things where, racquetball, squash, tennis, handball courts for commercial use, we put SE or P, simply because that had been the two previous discussions. But in the meeting, we did not actually talk about it. We talked more generally about this category. So this category has more of those options based on everything that we had talked about. And then this one, which was about pools for private use, this is related to the residential use. So I didn't know where we wanted to go, if we were going to allow a person, if we allowed a house, say, on Wooten Avenue, or, Wooten Avenue, would you then also allow them to have a pool? Do you see where I said, that could go various different ways, depending on what you wanted to do? Whereas commercial, I said SE or no, just to sort of put it that way.
But commercial for a pool, we're talking about,
Commercial would be somebody building a pool that would charge others to use the pool. And that's why I put
which would
that
not
as-
be the case, which would be differentiated from, say, someone with a small apartment complex that had a pool. That would fall in the residential, not.
Correct.
I just want to double check.
Yes,
Okay, okay.
and I can double check the definitions on those, but that's how I read them. Wade, do you have a?
No, that's right. That'd be an accessory use to an apartment building.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And then I put the outdoor theater as SE just because that's what it had been in PCOM. Just because, again, the discussion that we had last time was about drive-in theaters, and that was sort of the discussion. But obviously, this is where maybe a reconfiguration of definitions would come in, because there's an arts element that has an outdoor use. That could be something along what is going with Riverworks. And so the question of I created we'll get to the definition of, that includes performing arts space and things like that, and having that as a separate category that's permitted versus having outdoor theater as that. So that's how I was thinking about it, but I wanted your guys' take on that.
I like it as long as we have a clear definition and delineation between that, and,
Right.
very specifically, what does outdoor theater mean?
So in this case, in this use chart, that outdoor theater is an outdoor movie theater screen?
It is not related to that. It just, because I looked at it,
The outdoor is like a drive-in movie theater, I do believe.
it's like it, but I don't think the definition makes that clear, was my
It
recollection.
does, you're right, because we looked at that for,
Yeah, for
Riverworks.
Riverworks. It doesn't make it clear that I think was the intent, literally in the 50s when some of these definitions are from.
Good chance to go back and clarify those things.
Exactly. So that's
and
why,
there's probably,
go
yeah, I was
ahead.
gonna say, there's probably things that were missing also, so.
Yep, and so I have a section coming up that are some of those missing definitions, but we're gonna go back through and add and clarify a few more. I was just trying to, for the purposes of this discussion, add in what we've previously discussed to focus the conversation. But yeah, okay, and then these are the last section, which is temporary structures, and then the signs, which we'll talk about separately, because the conversation there was about doing it as via design guidelines, we might have to rewrite the code to accommodate what we want to do in there. But the other things like these other buildings, we had not had a full conversation about outside of the community garden, and we put that as permitted. So I wasn't sure quite how we felt about kennels and agricultural processing. I figured those would probably be no's, but I just didn't have any further comments than that. So I left them all as being not allowed, with the exception of the community garden. And the same with the alternative energy stuff. That's where I think we do need to wait. Yeah, Wade's going to put that as permitted for the on one, because that's what I forgot to put.
You can't deny it.
Yes, exactly.
Legally.
Yeah. So that was the one that I missed when I was doing these all. So that should be good. So are there any further questions about that? Do you want to go back to any? How do you want to address this?
How about the child care one real quick? Because
yeah.
there was a child care one for,
Yeah.
group daycare home, and you have it as permitted, but my thoughts are, we've had a couple of them over the years, and they were special exception in some of the areas just because of parking issues, drop-offs, adjacent uses,
Yeah.
things of that nature.
So
My thoughts.
Yeah, I put the child daycare center as being special exception. I think it was, which is what it is currently. I think what I put is group day home, because it is, what did I think the discussion was? I'm trying to remember.
The group daycare, because there's also elderly care these days.
So that must have been
That's
that.
something we should try and look at and clean up too, John, a good point.
Yep. Okay, so we'll add that one.
You took that from C in the old to
P.
permitted in the new?
And because that was, I believe we had a discussion with that, but with Lexi had talked about having that in there because of the lack of daycares overall. That was her argument there, is what I remember. I might be putting words in someone's mouth, and I don't want to do that.
Well, but when you start talking about, especially the neighboring,
Yeah.
what's neighboring it and draws and everything else,
I think you need to define it better. So
Yeah.
it's-
Well, yes, but then I'm still leaning towards SE,
Yeah,
not just going straight with permitted or something like that.
that's fine. I can change that. Oh, wrong,
Wrong computer.
wrong keyboard. Okay, that's fine.
Oh, throw a question mark behind that maybe, but,
Sure.
Yeah, we're gonna be visiting this a couple times, I would imagine.
yeah, absolutely. But I said, when you think about them in isolation, it's one
Yeah.
thing, but when you start thinking about it in the context of the neighborhood, that's when you start going, oh, yeah, didn't think of
And-
that.
And that's why when I went back and did it by just applying our general framework, that's how I sort of tried to do it
Yeah.
that way. But, as I said, we have a couple of definitions coming up. We'll talk about those in a second. And I know there are more that we had to look at, but I wanted to first go, like, the first one we'll talk about is a category in the use chart that has no definition in the definitions, which is drugstore. So it had a use, but it didn't have a definition. So there's a couple of things like that we're going to have to match, and so on. So that was the other thing to look up as well. But this was the way that it made sense to sort of organize and think about it for me. But we can change it however you like. Did you have anything else, Wade?
No, good work on your part there, taking everybody's input and working this out.
Perfect. So we'll do that. I'll start on the definitions, further definitions, for the next meeting, and then we can pull those up.
We're also trying to get a up-to-date use chart. I mean, this is, from the 70s or whatever, most likely, and updated a couple of times over the years, but I know there's stuff missing, especially stuff that goes into a cultural arts district.
Yes.
That we're trying to create, so.
And that's where we're starting, and you'll see a couple of definitions like that in the next section. And then I've been looking at some other things. The definition for art space we took was the most expansive one, but I'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, we'll definitely revisit this, and I think once we have a full conversation with this input, we can add more or detract some or look at it. But I just wanted to gather all that.
So do we not want to define an outdoor theater right now?
Let's pull up what it
Yeah.
was.
I think it's pretty simple for us. If it's a drive-in movie theater, no, but if it's outdoor performance, or even a screen, I don't think a screen, as long as it's not a drive-in,
Yeah, a
they can all be.
theater that with a defined projection system or something like that. I have it.
But you could also have a stage. So
Yeah,
Yep.
I feel like that's what we want to encourage in that area.
Which is exactly what Riverworks is.
Yeah, and then here's the definitions, and then I'm gonna open that.
Look at my phone.
Trying to figure out why your phone is over here by me. Mine over here.
Okay, now I'm gonna go Control F and go. Okay. And then- Okay, so theater, where the heck did it go? Because I see theater indoor, and theater legitimate,
right.
Which is what we use for Riverworks, I do
what we
believe.
use for Riverworks, but I don't see,
I don't think there was.
I don't think there was one for out, that was the issue. There wasn't one.
Yeah, that's what it was.
That's what it was. So what I'll do right now is, how is it in the use chart? Is it legitimate? Is it theater indoor, theater outdoor, theater legitimate?
That
It should be, but yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna make it and I'll share this with you, Wade. I have it in a Google Doc now, so I'll just share the
Sure.
definition.
But in general, we're talking outdoor theater. There's a couple ways, because they could have a screen and chairs set up at Riverworks. That would be an outdoor theater.
Yeah,
Most of us think of a drive-in movie, we think outdoor theater, but maybe we need to define that. That could be actually two categories. I don't know.
yeah,
I mean, it's where performances, unclassified performances take place. It could be-
right.
I
It
think
could be a
we
band, it could be,
Should we, well, and here's the question,
Any other
different,
outdoor-
and not drive-in,
performance event on-
like,
Right.
not to be viewed from your vehicle, I
Right.
think is important. And then if it is to be viewed from, because I don't mind movies or performances. I think both are art, right? And they
Yeah.
can both apply, but just specifically a drive-in is not something we would want in that area.
Yeah.
Other than that, any theater,
It's a combination of footprint and traffic,
Yeah.
especially the footprint.
yep.
And that's one of the updated things, because I'm sure there's no drive-in theaters anymore, so.
There's one in,
There's a couple.
there's one in the Eastern Shore I know, because we ended up going one time just to
I
do
was in
it.
South Dakota, there were lots.
Yes, oh, back home, there's tons.
I know where there's a few around here.
Yeah. So, I'm just gonna write right now, I'm gonna write in the document, not drive-through, and then we'll figure out
We'll work
what the
that out.
definition
Okay.
is. Okay, and then I'm gonna share this with you, Wade and John.
I don't know if there's
Okay,
enough land to do that anyway.
Probably
yeah.
not, but
But it's something we can address. And then, and we'll probably have to make it a structure that houses out, drive-through, drive-through theaters or outdoor theaters or things like that. Then in terms of that use, that outdoor theater use, then would we want to make that a not permitted then? Because we
Drive-in's
wanna-
not permitted, but
Say again, Wade?
a drive-in would be not permitted, obviously,
Right.
just what we're talking about, what we want to see, but we need to define it better, then we can make the determination, how's
That's,
that?
that's fine, that's fine. I'll have that worked out.
But
and
almost
I'll
any,
review all this.
almost any outdoor performance art that involves a stage is going to be an outdoor theater,
Right,
as long as people aren't, as long as it doesn't have the drive-in movie theater vibe going to it, then
But
that's
for the-
kind of what I envision for what an outdoor theater is.
but for the purposes of definitions, we could define outdoor theater to mean a drive-through, and then make the arts studio space definition inclusive of outdoor performing arts spaces. And that way
Okay with that, yes.
that way you've,
As long as we're very clear explicitly in the definitions.
right. So that's the way we can do that too. So I will make a note of that, and we'll look at that, and get back to you on that.
Or would you want those outdoor stages to be just permitted or special exception?
I would almost say any outdoor stage-like thing would like to see it as SE
Okay,
because of the optics and the visibility. We're going to want a lot more say, especially in such a dense area where we got very specific plans.
Want it facing the street or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Or some other things like.
Yeah.
I just know the history of what we've seen before.
yeah. All
Yeah.
right. So then we can look back at that definition and define it, maybe define it a couple different ways and give.
Your comment there, Wade, that means that special exception makes sense to you.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so, yep.
All right. All right. Is there any other use chart things that we want to talk about before we get into the definitions that we had previously discussed and can sort of incorporate into these next steps?
Niles, do we have is there a category for tobacconist? I don't remember seeing it.
Tobacconist.
Because,
Oh, yeah.
and I say that because I know a couple of art districts that have vape shops in them.
Yes. Now, we do have the thing about dispensaries, which we had to put in.
Yeah.
And then, but I don't think we have something specific.
I don't know if we do either, actually.
Yeah, hang on, let me just check one thing. So, I'm trying to think how, yeah. That's just the drugstore one, we had that. And then I wanted to know,
But that's a perfect example of missing things.
nope, that's a good example, yeah. I don't think we do, so I'll look at that. Okay. Let me just see here. that, okay. Okay. I'll have that as noted as well for the definitions as well. I'm gonna add a comment on the definitions, and I'll just keep a running list of things that we wanna look at. So I'm gonna do here, add a comment. Okay. There we go. All right, and then we can add the list to that as we go. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, any last things on the use chart or definitions other than the ones that we'll get into in a second? All right. So then for commercial uses, just as we laid out, there was a desire to maximize the land area. So that's where we went through with the use chart. Then there was some specific definitions that we talked about that were definitely not on the list that we wanted to talk about. So the first one, as I mentioned, we have a category called drugstore, but we don't have a definition for drugstore. So I found this definition. This is the Howard County definition. And it says, drugstore or pharmacy, retail store primarily engaged in filling and selling prescription drugs and medical supplies, non-prescription medications, and related goods and services. May also sell non-medical goods such as cosmetic, cards, and groceries, such as food and household items. Accessory uses may include automatic teller machines and drive-through service facilities. So that definition kind of matches what the CVS is, and that was sort of my thought in drafting it, based on the Howard County definition. So, any thoughts on that?
It's reasonably broad, but at the same time, it's focused enough, so I'm good with it.
Yeah, and should not be in the CAD.
Okay,
It shouldn't be in the CAD, right? Plenty of other areas to put a drugstore. I don't think we want in the CAD.
I'm gonna date myself, Peoples.
There was. I remember that.
Yeah.
I didn't want to use one of the ones that are out there, you know?
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
all right, that's fine. I know Lexi had brought up potentially having it, but,
Yeah.
you know,
I think it was an old-time drugstore. But
Homeopathic.
yeah.
That's where I was gonna go, is do we have something for the homeopathic end of things? Is that just retail?
General
We
retail.
could look,
Because you see that a lot. in
Yeah, yeah.
Art.
You do.
yeah.
Have to define what a homeopathic store would be.
Or, I'm just putting it down as,
You having to define everything.
Yeah.
They must have that. I mean, there must be one out there because you go into the art districts and you see them
Oh, yeah.
consistently.
yeah. I put
You
it,
go to Art District, Tom?
He got lost.
I added homeopathic store to the list for looking at definitions in that document. So we can do it that way.
I mean, do we have a catch-all for other general retail that hasn't been?
Yes, there is.
Yeah,
I mean, I would,
I'm gonna look at the definition, but
yeah,
honestly see that kind of non-prescription fitting into that.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of the way I see it, but.
Yeah, because it's nothing really different than selling anything else. The key for the drugstore is it's the primary engaged in filling and selling prescription drugs. Right.
yeah, I mean, there's a fine line for the little tea shops and the tobacco shops and all the little stuff versus another retailer that could be a major brand moving into the same area.
Right.
And how do you differentiate? I'm not for sure with one category.
And I don't know if you want to go down that road,
I know.
I mean, you can go to square footage. You can only have X amount of square footage for retail facility. That is sometimes used.
all right. We'll look at because I was trying to find just the general, the general commercial kind of, or general retail definition, and I didn't see it on first glance, just using retail as the term. Do you remember what it is, Wade?
No, but
Okay.
we'd have to look at it. But anyways,
We'll look at
we
that.
need to
Yep.
just work that out. We don't, yeah.
Yep, no, I'll add that to the list to just remind ourselves here.
How about then just excluding drive-through facilities, because that also, goes against kind of what we're looking for.
All right.
And of course, and helps with space and
There is that.
walkability and all that. You'd have to exclude it, right? Not just say you can't have it, or just say you can't have it.
Sorry. Yeah, okay.
Or at a minimum, anything would require an SE with a drive.
Okay.
Which I think it probably would
Yeah.
today,
Yeah.
probably.
All right. So SE on things for drive-throughs or,
It's automatic everywhere, but.
yeah, that's
I
what
thought it might be.
that's what I would think that it would be, yeah.
Okay, I can remember.
All right. All right, so then the second definition that we had on that list is the art studio space, single artist or multi-artist studio. This is the one from the Blacksburg Arts District. And I modified it slightly because they had 3 different definitions for art studio. And when we went through this last time, Lexi liked definition C under their definitions. And what I did is I basically combined it to include both a single artist or a multi-artist. That's the only change I made, but I did it to sort of fit what we were looking for, so that it covers both eventualities.
It seemed reasonable.
Okay, and then concurrent with that, one of the other definitions that we did not have was gallery. And so we do have a reference though we have a much broader one, which I will read, which is the recreation or entertainment establishment commercial. And it just reads, a commercial recreation land use conducted in open, partially enclosed, screened, or entirely within a building. Typical uses include tennis courts, outdoor racquetball courts, motorized carts, motorized motorcycle tracks, and motorized model airplane flying facilities. Man, that is a oddly specific one. Arcade, arena, art gallery, studio, art center, assembly hall, auditorium, club, or lounge, community center, conference center, exhibit hall, gymnasium, and so on. So it's sort of like the general entertainment one, but for our purposes of what we were talking about with galleries, and with the arts district, it seemed that a more specific one was where the body was at. So I just included that. And then, is everybody good with the gallery one as well then?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, now the last one is I modified this. This is again a Howard County one, but I modified it in a couple of ways. So this is Arts District Mixed Use, a land use designation that permits any use or combination of uses allowed, and then this is where I modified it, allowed in the CAD, including supporting infrastructure such as utilities, public or private roadways, multimodal circulation systems adjacent to public and private roadways, surface parking lot, parking structures, and underground parking. This use would contain, and this is the part that I added to have that discussion about second floor apartments, so we can obviously modify this. This use would contain first floor retail, commercial, or art space with residential space above. So if you, based on our discussion, what I was hearing is maybe just eliminating that last sentence or not.
No.
Or do you want to keep it?
Why would you, why would
Because
you?
you were talking about potentially wanting to do, you want that to be a separate definition.
Correct.
That's right.
One's mixed use, one is very specifically a residential apartment, whatever you want to call it.
Perfect.
Hey, Wade, underground parking and water protection, really where we want to
There's
go.
no reason to include it. We can strike that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you for that.
Yeah, I just, again, that was the Howard language, so that part I just kept in because I wasn't sure how you guys were feeling.
But with the walk in town, I can't see anybody building a parking lot going
Yeah, we
down.
can't
Yeah.
either.
No.
but-
But we can just eliminate it, I think, if,
Yeah.
and then just have it end with parking structures.
Yeah.
Since that was an example of something
Yeah.
that you wanted, so,
Well, that, again, that one's going to be. that's
apartment building,
That's
yes.
going to be different.
So what I will do, let's look at apartment. Because I think we did it as apartment house. A building containing 3 or more dwelling units. That's it. That's the entire definition.
Okay.
That's what you have at Kaliva.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, yeah, that's true.
Because, and, so, okay, so it works for turning something into a traditional school boarding house.
And,
It should work for, if someone wanted to put in a 3-story, 50-unit apartment complex with a first-floor parking garage, it should work for that too, I guess.
yeah, there's a separate definition for boarding house, just so you know.
Oh.
Yeah, it's got its own.
Yeah.
Yep.
Really?
Yes, I can read that for you if you'd like.
Now you got me curious what the difference is.
A dwelling in which, for compensation, lodging or lodging and meals are furnished to 2 or more single adults, 2 or more families, or 1 single adult and 1 family. Boarding house shall not be deemed a home occupation.
Okay. I'm sure there was some history behind that at one point in time.
Well, that's.
Absolutely.
So if you go back to the 1800s, your boarding house would be something similar to that, and then you'd come down and have your breakfast or your lunch or whatever. More like Best Way.
It would be like a bed and breakfast with the,
Yeah, that's, I think where that comes from, is that more sense of a, because the bed and breakfast has its own other definition, which is a one-family detached dwelling unit as defined in this section that is owned, occupied, and in which a guest room or guest rooms are provided for compensation as overnight accommodation or transient visitors who remain no longer than 2 weeks in any one visit, and 2, breakfast is customarily included in the charge for the room. A bed and breakfast lodging is not a hotel, motel, country inn, home occupation, or other defined or regulated, other use defined or regulated elsewhere in this ordinance.
Okay. Very specific.
So is the length of stay the only difference between a boarding house and a bed and breakfast?
That is, I believe that is the case.
Yeah. Okay. And having stayed at both in the last 6 months,
Yeah,
there aren't that many boarding houses out there, but they do still exist, and they're long-term residents usually.
yeah.
Okay.
Airbnb is a boarding,
It's,
possibly.
it's potentially, but
Possibly.
Depends on how long they stay.
it's also, it has,
It's all about the stay.
I know in the county, I think it falls under the accessory dwelling
Yeah.
regulations, so it can go a couple of different ways.
Do you know if the county limits the stay duration?
I don't believe so, but I remembered that that was a whole conversation in Gaither. I believe Gaithersburg does.
I could see
But
that
I-
being a whole conversation down county about,
Yeah,
I can see.
but I don't believe the county did. I know there's a whole discussion when I worked in Rockville about what to do there. So I can look through that if that interests
It
me.
was more of a curiosity
Okay,
question.
okay. So, so then in terms of apartment house, you were good with keeping it as is for our
I
purposes?
think it still fits, because it doesn't preclude having a parking, it was very, very broad, very
Yeah.
short, definitely very broad, so, yeah.
Yeah,
But that's, yeah, but it's differentiated from the mixed use, that was the key thing,
Yeah.
What's up?
Differentiated from the boarding house.
yeah,
as B and B.
3 kitchens, I guess, would be the definition in the apartment, right?
yes, yeah, well, so Yes, under the county, I want to see what our dwelling unit says. Because
We need to fix it.
I think we do.
Yeah.
Because I think I don't think trying to find the exact dwelling unit. A dwelling, a building or portion thereof arranged or designed to provide living facilities for one or more families. And then a one-family dwelling is a building containing no more than one dwelling unit. A townhouse is a dwelling unit that is in a structure consisting entirely of one family dwelling unit. And then it goes into how you divide up a townhouse. So it says, is attached to and divided from one or more other dwelling units by a vertical party wall. What? Yeah.
Different definition.
Has at least two direct entrances from the outside, either on the front and side or front and rear, and has an abutting ground level outdoor area for the exclusive use of its occupants. So that is the definition of a townhouse. So
It should be a attached single-family house now.
yes. Because that's so for dwelling one family, all it says a building containing not more than one dwelling unit. So that's where we will want to add that it's detached, right, to the definition? Because
All single families either attached or detached. You don't have townhomes anymore.
right, that's right. Okay, so we'll change that. I'll add that to the list here, up at the top. And then do we want to add that definition of, because for accessory apartment, it has for a second dwelling unit that is part of an existing one-family detached, there's detached there, dwelling, or is located in a separate existing accessory structure on the same lot as the main dwelling with provision within the accessory apartment for cooking, eating, sanitation, and sleeping. Such a dwelling unit is subordinate to the main dwelling. So
So that should also be an apartment house.
right.
Or in-law suite, whatever they call them.
Yeah, that's for that's definition would be used for an in-law suite or something like that.
But shouldn't we specify that those cooking, sleeping, eating,
Go for an apartment too.
go for apartment house?
Yeah, we could add that. So we will add to apartment house the provisions
Allow them to build without a bit.
related
probably.
to cooking, eating, and okay, and then for
Communal facility.
and then I'll add
To a
Boarding house.
Yeah.
for dwelling, add detached to townhouse and single family. Okay, so that will all be what we look at as we go forward.
So, in all those definitions we just went through, where would a traditional duplex fall?
I don't think there is a definition for that in our code.
See one though, right? It's just an attached single-family dwelling, isn't it?
It would be, that contains two, because a single family is for a single family, that's in the definition. So duplex would be a single structure that has more than one, let's just call it two families.
I think it falls on our multifamily dwelling section in our code.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry, yeah.
It's a very small townhouse.
yeah. And let's see,
Okay.
And is that not in these I think that's not in these definitions. I think that's somewhere.
It's not, it's a total separate section.
That's right. Okay. So we will review that section as well. So I'll say review multi-fam. Okay. All right. All right. Anything else? All right. Then the next part was the the form-based zoning discussion that came from John's presentation last time. So what I did is I went through John's presentation and I basically pulled out questions, some of which were based on some of the things that we'd sort of mentioned in the course of the discussion on form-based. So one was this idea of frontages and walkways and all of that stuff. So I went back and I looked through the Frederick form-based zoning as well to kind of see how they do it. And there's a couple of things to mention. So I'm just going to read this. Other communities, such as Frederick, put much emphasis on the frontage on the street. Our current design guidelines already encourage commercial development that is as close to the frontage as possible and consistent with the historic look and feel of the cultural arts district. However, a couple of questions related to this are worth discussing. So the first one is the city of Frederick distinguishes between different types of frontages, and we could potentially apply that same type of rubric to different roads. So the way I said it is, say, looking at Fisher Avenue, how the frontage do you want there? Do you want more walking space as they are, as that's where more of the storefronts currently are, and so you'd have a different frontage there, versus, say, Norris Road, where it's a narrower street already, and also could have different types of usage there than on Fisher. So one question that I rose is, do we want to apply these different frontages? So in Frederick, they have what is called general urban frontage or tech storefront or things like that versus a regular storefront. So it's sort of giving flexibility on how wide the walkways are, or how close the building has to be on that walkway to accommodate the different things that we want to do in the same zone. So that was the way that I thought was worth addressing what John had brought up about walkways, but I can, hear whatever you guys are thinking.
Yeah, like I just couldn't picture, having covered walkways on a street like Norris Road, but I could on Fisher Avenue,
And Willard.
And,
In West Willard.
in West Willard, yeah.
Because, my vision is to have West Willard become less of a residential look and feel and more of a Fisher look and feel over time. But yeah, Norris would not be able to do that. And Wooten, the way it exists today, probably couldn't either.
Yeah.
Emphasis on the way it exists today comment.
And let me just do one other thing while we're talking about this.
One of the other things that you're talking about, roadways and construction as curb and gutter. Currently, there are sections of within that area that do not have curb and gutter. Do you want curb and gutter? Let's start from the road and work our way in. Do you want curb and gutter all through there?
Anywhere where we're gonna have storefronts and walkways, yeah, right?
Yes, that's what I was.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm trying to think of where I wouldn't. Where isn't there today?
There's none
North
along,
is- I could've tried-
across from the high school, there's none.
Oh.
Down,
Yeah, okay.
West Willard on the east side, if you will. There's none.
And Norris.
But the code does require anybody who builds a new subdivision has to put curb and gutter in, of course.
Right, but
Well, you just said subdivision. What about commercial? And
We had, when Klein's Kleindense was to build the shopping center where Tractor Supply is in right now. We required him to put curb and gutter all the way around that section.
Right.
Trying to think, well, Dollar General had to put it in there with no curb and gutter there. Yeah, just about anywhere we're required to do it.
We've
Yeah.
always required it, but there's nothing that says that it's not codified. It's not part of the,
Well, and a lot of those were state highway also at the time, and that's probably a requirement of the state highway, I imagine, wouldn't you think, John?
that's correct. That's correct.
All right, I'm going to try to, hang on a second, Wade. I'm trying to, I'm going to share my screen for a second, just to give everybody the sense of it. This is, what I'm going to share is what I found in Frederick, and I'll share this around with everybody afterwards. Why is it not letting me present here? Maybe, I'm clicking the thing. Why? That's so weird. It is not letting me click on any of the icons right now. Okay, so I'll send the link later, if that's okay, Wade?
Sure.
Just to keep it going. This is what, they have several different categories. So they have urban general frontage, they have urban neighborhood frontage, they have storefront frontage, and they have local frontage, where in the local frontage is a good example of where they've set back the apartment a little bit to have walkways and green space in front of the apartment building. So that's an example of a clearer one, I think, of what they're talking about different frontages. And then that's the tech shop frontage, which is, sort of, and that's an example of where they have arts related, is in that tech shop frontage. So that's how they, combined it with light industrials and makerspace and all of that. And that's where they have, so for that one, they emphasize, I think, a little bit more, trees and the curb and gutter and that kind of thing. So that's just an example of how they divide these different frontages to match. And then they go the placement of where you're supposed to place it to on the street. So how you're supposed to place it on the street. And I'll get into that in a second as the second point about this. But that sort of generally talks about how so my thought in bringing this up is on Norris Road or whatever, do we want a different setback, or in this case, build to, and I'll get to that in a second, or versus on Fisher and such, we want sidewalk, trees, and we'll have the street detail, I think, was the part that I thought would go along with this. But that's just my sort of general bit. And let me, while we're trying to do that, while you're thinking about that, it's not doing what I want it to do again. We will not deal with that today right now. Okay, technology is not being my friend, but that's okay. But yeah, so and again, we don't have to make a decision now, but I would just wanted to bring that up as part of the discussion.
So, yes, I'm open to having different ones. Well, we just have to define the different ones.
Yeah. So what I can do for next meeting, I think, is dig even deeper into how they define it and maybe find a couple of different ideas of other communities as well. This was just relating to what John had done and using a place that had already done it to kind of figure those things out. And so part of that will, I believe, looking at street details. So we have buildings, sidewalk, street, buildings, vegetation, as we talked about before, street and so on. So how that would all fit, and looking at different scenarios.
When you're doing that,
Yeah.
keep in mind what we approved for the Donegan property. In making, it would be nice to see some some continuity between what we're doing here and what they're doing, because they're already doing that. They're probably
Yes.
doing that down there to a large scale. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
what
So,
it's gonna look like. I can remember just generally, but they have, it was the close.
yep, and I think and that fits a lot of the things that are already in the design guide. What I think it is more talking about is being it more precise, given what we're doing, you know. That was the way that I thought of it. So one of the second part that this next page of this thing goes into a lot of detail, which I won't get into right now, is the way, because Lexi had asked about how to define the setbacks for things in the commercial zone. Our code does not give any specific setback for commercial buildings. Instead, it just talks about trying to be as close to the frontage as possible. The way Frederick dealt with this, issue was to create guidelines that were build-to lines. So instead of being set back from a certain distance, you had to build to a certain distance to make it more precise. So they would say things like, building facades are required, building lines, have required building lines, as prescribed in the individual building form standards. So in other words, they would create instead of the building line being the restriction point, it's the point at which they had to build to make the commercial properties all line with each other across the space
It's the starting point.
as the starting point. And so, and then they would have different depths for which each of these different frontages would have to meet. So one was 24 feet versus 36 feet in the different, so the 24 feet, I think, was the urban general and urban neighborhood versus 36 was the local and tech shop ones, right? So they're trying to negotiate those build points so that you're building to a specific point on the street rather than setting back from a specific point on the street.
But you also have to remember that you don't want that uniform flat wall.
Right,
So each lot may have its own build-to line.
yeah. And we could also do it where you have to, one thing that we did in the village was have that measurement point be based on the properties within 300 feet of your property. So that differentiation is built into what's already building there.
Sure.
So you're not doing something extremely in front or extremely behind, even if the building line would allow you to. You have to work within that space.
So sometimes in another jurisdiction, what they do is they say within 10% of the existing frontage of the adjacent buildings.
Of course, that wouldn't work on Norris Road, would it?
Norris is a weird one, just because
Yeah.
There's nothing there.
But that's why we could define the frontages differently based on those two roads. That's the way that the form-based looks. That's the way I'm thinking about it. I might be completely off here, but that's the way that I was thinking about it. Because the way they do it is by a map. They say your frontage on this area is, with this frontage is on this road, and then on this frontage is this road.
the concept works. We gotta see what.
Right, and this was the part of it where I was having the most thought that I put into it, was trying to figure out, because the last time we talked about is sort of nebulously how to regulate it versus having a firm set of how to regulate it. And so this was an attempt of trying to make it more firm, but we also want some flexibility in there. And so we can look at various ways of creating that flexibility. There's no more discussion on that. I'll go to the next
Yep.
point there. So the next point is also related to these walkways. It's just, we talked about, and just to reconnect on the idea of making it a walkable community, so include elements such as green space, say along Fisher Avenue was the thought that we were discussing. This could include providing more comprehensive a more comprehensive commercial sidewalk detail, such as including the county's 10-foot requirement for sidewalks in commercial areas. And John had pulled that up. So that was the idea of mandating certain widths that would be greater than what we would do in other parts of town for sidewalks, just because of accommodating commercial traffic.
So the county in the commercial,
In their
area,
commercials-
their sidewalks are defined to be how large
10 feet wide.
versus?
That's a lot.
That's-
That is a lot.
It's a lot of.
That's downtown Bethesda.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe not Old Town Gaithersburg up here.
Right.
Crown Farm,
Yeah.
some of it.
Yeah, 10's a lot.
Yeah, and then I just use that as the number based on the counties that we had talked about previously. So I was not saying we should or shouldn't, I was just using that as an example.
If we make them 8 feet, then we could use them as trails.
Yeah, exactly. That goes to the other discussion we're having, certainly.
If we can make them all 8 foot. The Riverworks building is very close to the edge of the road. John, I don't know if we can get, do you have 8 foot there?
Yeah,
Say again, I'm sorry, someone walked out the door.
Riverworks buildings are 8 feet to put a sidewalk?
Riverworks is going to be
With the curb and gutter?
there, yeah,
Yeah.
because of the frontage of the existing building
yeah,
and the handicap ramp.
yeah.
I guess the 10.
What I'd like to do is get a site plan and be able to take a look at and lay some sidewalks out. Do we have green spaces? Some areas could have green spaces, some won't.
Yeah.
But at least give us an idea, sort of creating a vision of some sort.
And green
We can do
space.
that.
Yeah, like,
Yeah, that's a good idea.
and is there any, I don't think there's any part of that, the sidewalks that are a part of the trail system in that area, right?
It basically, it's considered, the one along Fisher on this side up until West Willard
That's correct.
is considered part of the trail system. And then then it jumps to the other side up. But that is just because it is an existing sidewalk. I think it's labeled as such under the trails.
Okay.
Trail's 6 foot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool to see, like, everything kind of overlaid, like, what areas could we actually looking 10-foot sidewalks, and what does it make sense, and if not?
Yeah, we can look at, I think that's part of what Wade was suggesting
Yeah.
with the site plan, is we can apply the different widths and show you that, and show this stretch, it would be this much, this stretch, it would be this much, and then see what we wanted to do.
We're tight up in there, especially when you start mixing sidewalks and green space requirements, you're gonna run out of land real quick.
But if we don't do it where we can, right, if we don't require it where we can, then we're not gonna have any.
Agreed,
So,
agreed.
For instance, that one section that they use in a discussion, they call it, you know what they call it. In the older town section where the existing townhouses going up towards the garage, we can't expand.
Oh,
them.
God,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's almost like.
You know what I was gonna call it? I was
I just remember what Cal used to call it, right? I hadn't thought of that phrase in a long time.
Yeah,
tell me that afterwards.
I will.
Almost like we need to remove that sidewalk and just push everybody over to, Beale, that Beale?
No, you're talking about on,
Through the Willard Park that's going
oh,
to.
yeah, on that's the old, what was that lane called? The one that no longer exists.
Cubic.
Cox Lane,
Cox
Lane.
Lane, Cox Lane.
I remember that.
Yep. Yep.
It's not direct, but
But yeah, well, I mean, that's part of what
safer.
next
Well,
door
that's-
will do
that's the-
is
Gonna help, yeah.
is connected.
Rather than putting the crosswalk between the old town hall and
Yeah.
red brick building.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna build that, and
Yeah.
that'll take care of it.
And then it will just jog back and then it'll
Exactly.
be back onto there. Alright. Alright, then we'll revisit that and look at it with a site plan and, do we want to say sidewalk with context? Okay. Then the last thing, and this is all related, so I think we'll just talk about it here, but at a previous meeting, there was a discussion about ensuring specific standards for tree plantings in the bioswales and other stormwater management devices might be part of the overall road detail. And that's where I'd put, we could either have this in the regulation as part of the zone-based regulation or part of the design guidelines. But I think if we're going to go with the frontages, it would have to be in the form-based anyways.
Yeah.
So we can just nix that question altogether. So that's fine. All right. And then the last, if we're all good on that.
All good on that.
Okay.
I'm just gonna ask my fellow commissioners if they feel like plowing through the design guidelines, or are they getting as glossy-eyed as I am?
Yes.
Yeah, we can pick that up.
It's up to you guys. Just wanted to ask.
You do it in 20 minutes?
We can do it probably quicker than that. Most of these are more specific questions than the previous sections.
Okay.
Good with that, Kev?
Very specific questions,
Fire
sure.
away.
So this was, again, taken from the request of the Planning Commission was to go with the Georgetown Historic District 1. So I reviewed them, and then these were the questions that came to my head. Our code provides for different areas for signs. Basically, they have different signs depending on their type. So example, flat wall signs and things like that. So the Georgetown ones just apply here's catch-all for all signs in the historic district. And they say they can't be bigger than 12 inches, end of discussion.
Really? That's it?
Yeah.
12 inches?
12 inches, that's it. Because they're all basically, if you've ever walked through old Georgetown, they're all basically those hanging signs, like the Clavis signs. They're all that. They're all historic-looking signs like that. So my first question was, do we want to keep the size provisions that we already have in the sign code? So one example in the commercial district is this. A total sign area of 1 square foot for each linear foot of building frontage shall be allowed. So basically, it is based on how much of a frontage you have. This is fairly common in commercial areas, by the way.
More than our code.
Yeah, this is already in our code. This is the example I took from our code because the Georgetown one just said 12 inches. That's why. Does that make sense, Wade? I might be confusing people, so I want to make sure.
Yeah, it's the best way to do it, yeah.
Yeah. So this was an example of something that we could do. So multiple frontage buildings are limited to 2 signs and are considered 1 permanent sign for the purposes of permitting. But basically, do we want to keep standards like that, or do we want to set specific sign sizes for the arts district?
The question is, another way to approach it would be to say a maximum size of.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless we have which I don't right now, I'm not saying that we can't, but unless we have an idea of what we want all the signs to look like,
Yeah.
I don't think we can go with any, right, unless we say we want them all to have this character and this look, then we can start.
Right.
Otherwise, we have to go with our
That's fine.
town code.
I can pull that back out, and look at it from a different perspective on that. The next one, or unless you want to have a further discussion on that, I'm sorry.
I think we could come up with a theme,
Okay.
but then we can write those regulations, let's come up with what the date should look
And
like.
I think we come up with a max size.
Yeah.
Maybe not 12 inches, but also not something that's in relationship to your building size.
Right.
Because think about what that would allow for a sign at HealthWorks versus something the footprint of the Clava building, for example. I'd rather see some uniformity in that area.
Bassett's and everything down that way, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know,
I think for Bassett's, it's a very long.
What does HealthWorks have as a sign? I can't even remember.
It's got a freestanding out front.
Yeah.
And then they have like a mounted wall sign on the building itself.
Yeah.
Or anytime, sorry, yeah.
Yep. And that was another question that I had, is did we want to limit the types of signs we have in the arts district to eliminate things like freestanding signs? Because, again, going on the historic model, it's more about those like hanging signs, wall signs, things like that.
One of my
Yeah, and I have a question about that.
Right, one of my concerns up in that area was illuminated signs in general, especially when it's just commercial, it's one thing, but now when you're mixing residential in on the second floors, if somebody's got the Dunkin' Donuts sign, which I'm fine with in that spot, but I wouldn't want that directly across the narrow street facing into my second floor bedroom.
Right. And just for reference, in the Georgetown ones, they say no illumination at all because they have so many streetlights along that main stretch. So what I was thinking about in terms of that was, one suggestion would be to limit, I don't know why that, it was to limit the illumination to say like only uplighting or only interior lighting, but not neon, basically. Prohibit neon signs and other more distracting illumination.
I see where you're
So
going.
You could just do
Yeah.
certain types of lighting, but very limited lighting.
I like where you're going with that person. That's kind of what I was envisioning too. Because you definitely get, especially, I just realized we have daylight savings coming up soon. It's going to be dark well before, early soon. And I'm just trying to think, navigating through our downtown area with poor lighting on some of the signs.
Yeah.
So definitely some of the business owners would complain about that. So you need something in between. That's a good compromise.
Yeah, so that's where I was thinking, just limiting it to either low uplighting or interior
Yeah.
illumination, but not neon.
So like,
Yeah.
if I had a gooseneck pointing back at my sign, just a little
Yeah.
illumination.
You can define it by lumens.
Yeah, lumens,
Yeah.
there we go. And then, so we skipped just one, just that was about materials. And this is where we'd had a discussion about the materials used for the signs. And my thought was sort of in keeping with what Georgetown had done, which was historic materials. So wood, natural materials, basically. So wood, other types of steel, like metal signs, things like that, that would be more in keeping with the historic nature of it. But Kevin had a point about like artisan signs where, using seashells was the example
Yeah,
he used.
yeah.
Of, would we want to allow that because it's an art district? So that was the competing sort of historical versus arts there.
And material-wise, I mean, they do sandblasting out signs and different stuff with different materials that look much better
Yeah.
than natural materials. They look like natural materials, but they last a lot longer. And so I don't know if we want to limit the materials, maybe the look of what it looks like,
Yeah.
not the materials themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, look,
Question
materials.
is you can get into colors and. all
Yeah.
those lines.
But
Yeah.
if we can find a broad enough category, maybe that would work for it. That's just the way I was thinking.
I think what we're trying to do is preclude any of the big backlit plastic stuff like we have over at Subway, CVS,
Yeah.
Dunkin'. We don't want.
Liberty,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that laminate, the
Yeah.
Dollar General sign was what I
That's
was
kinda-
thinking about.
We don't want that for sure.
So we can look at how to maybe minimize that in the look and feel. It may be the appearance of natural materials or something like that as a stand-in, and then add in the lumens and things like that.
Right.
And then the next one was just a note, because we'd already done the illumination one, just about the content of signs. It's the same content restrictions are in the Georgetown guidelines as in our code. It's literally verbatim the same. So for commercial signs. So my thought there was just to keep it as is. So don't make any changes based on that one. And then the last one, the second to last one is the topic of site location for signs. So, for example, we could restrict to awnings or flat walls, but not freestanding signs. This goes back to that question of, it tended to be in historic areas that you wouldn't have freestanding signs. They would more be attached to the building or awnings or things like that. And so that was just my attempt at looking at location.
Okay. If you had signs on, Tom, on your entryway into you remember the great sign debacle from several years back?
Well, Tamaka.
The one up off Jerusalem. That's basically built into the berm.
Facade.
Facade, yeah. So that's not freestanding. So that would fit in, so the,
Yeah, we'd have to look at, again, this is another part where we have definitions and
Okay.
specific definitions, and we can revise those, but yeah, I think that would be slightly different.
I'm having a hard time figuring out where someone would do something like that, but I can picture, yeah. I was just trying to make sure I understood exactly what freestanding counted as, but if you build it into part of the structure.
Right.
Any part of the structure, even if it's a retaining wall or a,
Entrance features are a little bit different, and that's really an entrance feature with a sign embedded in it.
yeah.
I think that's came about, because that's still limited to size for the sign, but the entrance feature itself is the wall,
Yeah,
for that particular one.
Yeah.
Otherwise, freestanding is exactly a specific size.
Yeah.
So entrance features are separate from that.
My general thought is I'm not wild about freestandings in what we're trying to do down there.
Where?
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, the whole area, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought you said something specific.
No. I was mentally thinking through some what if scenarios, and I was having trouble coming up with a reason somebody's absolutely got to have a freestanding sign.
And one thing that it's not in here that we need to talk about was, what brought this whole thing up initially, was murals.
Yeah.
Because if a mural has
yes.
a letter or number, it becomes a sign according to our code,
And that,
and it's not one.
and yeah, and I didn't get into that here because that was not something that was discussed in the Georgetown one. I was just pulling for that, for this discussion, but we can add that too. And I'll add a note on this
Your
one.
mail pouch.
I wait to solve it tonight, but that's definitely on the radar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to do it there. I want to do it here. There we go. I'm going to add mural. And that's where we could add another definition, basically, and separate it out.
Chuck's favorite thing. Chuck's favorite thing.
I know Riverworks is, the overall plan, I think they're gonna have a big mural on
Yeah.
the side of it that says Riverworks or something. I remember
Yeah.
seeing a picture of it, right?
Which currently,
That would be a sign, and so this is where it gets into, you have to have, in order for you to have a sign on your building, it has to be attached to the building. It can't be a part of the building, basically.
And the definition of a sign is anything that has a letter or number in it and depicts something about a business. Under the way it's worded, it precludes having any,
Yeah, I think it'd be cool to
Yeah.
enable the arts district to have more flexibility with that kind of stuff, right? I mean,
yes.
paintings and murals of such would be encouraged, right?
Yeah,
Just because it says it's a mural that has their address on it or their name of the business, I don't know that would.
For instance, there's an interesting case in Rapid City, Wade's seen it, is that they actually have a graffiti wall where the people come and paint the entire wall and everything else.
yeah.
But it's a designated wall
Yeah.
for that.
So this is the sign definition. This goes back to the definitions document. Any structure, part thereof, or device attached thereto or painted or represented thereon, or any material or thing illuminated or otherwise which displays or includes any number, letter, word, model, banner, emblem, insignia, device, trademark, or other representation used as or in the nature of an announcement, advertising, direction, designation of any person, firm, group, organization, place, commodity, produce, service, profession, blah, blah, blah. It keeps going on. Or industry which is located upon any land, any building, or upon any window, standing alone, a flag, emblem, or other insignia of a nation, governmental unit, education, charitable, blah, 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 or similar group, drive, or event which shall not be included within the meaning of this definition. So that is what we're talking about, because it talks about including any number, letter, or word.
Just as an example, I think I ran into this with the mural in Bassett.
Yeah,
We had White's Ferry. I think we literally took the letters.
Yes.
I think I got complaints about that, so we painted over White's Ferry, it just became the ferry. I mean, what is it, White's Ferry and, the sign above it.
Yeah, just without the
That was
words.
like, what? But that's,
Yeah.
if you read the interpretation of the law, that's what it was. That's the kind
Yeah.
of stuff you run into, it's like, it might be a little too restrictive.
So let me add a note in this document about sign definition.
At the same time, John, you don't want someone, letting somebody just put a mail pouch sign on the side of their building, paint on the side of the building, so got to strike a balance.
In some places I know have like carve-outs for old business names. So even though the business no longer exists, they still have to maintain the sign that says that this business used to be here. So like, imagine a historic marquee.
No, I get you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See where it's
So-
going. There's that issue here.
Something
Yep.
else that I want to talk about, but it's just gonna be between you and I.
All right. And so then, the last thing was about limiting mountings. This is something that the Georgetown one talks about. This is more has to do with actual historic preservation. I just included it because it's not something we had talked about. We're basically in the Georgetown code, it restricts how you can attach things to buildings because you don't want to damage the historic building. So it has specific definitions. And I didn't think that was necessary for ours, but I just want to put it just so that you guys knew that that was something that was being considered elsewhere. Since yeah.
But is there something that already
So this is a good
touches
question.
on that?
So the larger question is, we don't have a historic preservation, there isn't a historic a commission or anything like that that reviews the historical preservation. There are certain buildings, like Old Town Hall, John Poole House, that are under the Maryland Trust for Historic Preservation. And so therefore, there are restrictions on those specific buildings.
No,
Also knows about this,
there's not any restrictions on those buildings unless those buildings have taken.
Money, yeah.
Like grants or monies out and there's a covenants on it. Otherwise, they just have historic designations.
Yes.
There's not a district or a zoning regulation that is over any of them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Thomas Pool also has.
Yes.
Because it took money here a long time ago.
Yeah.
Who Arth ran into that, they ran afoul when they started doing some stuff.
yeah. So, yeah, thank you for clarifying that. But yes, so outside of those specific situations, there is no historic preservation requirements. Right. And that concludes it. As I just mentioned for next steps, I was going to say we can discuss this more. We'll talk about parking next time. We can get together if you
Yeah.
want and
Work on that.
And work on that. And then at some point, Wade had brought this up, and just a reminder, at some point, we'll bring in the property owners themselves to sort of show what we're thinking about and get their input as well.
Well, that puts us down to number 7 on the agenda.
All
Move we adjourn?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, see you guys.